Good evening, my friends. Are you here for another spooky story? Then come on in. Settle in now. For tonight, I have quite the tale to tell. Are you ready? Good. Then let us begin. Fears. We all have them, but which one strikes us with the most debilitating of terrors? Tonight, I will be telling you a truly terrifying experience of my own. Oh well, so it seemed at the time. So gather round and listen well to reality-breaking Ringtone. The story takes place 2 years before I moved from the Appalachians to become a transplant to the Midwest. A former classmate of mine was then a manager at a local grocery store. Our store had problems with high turnover, as many retail places do, and she knew that I was having difficulty locating a job elsewhere that would afford me enough to find a new place. Thinking she could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, she asked me to put in an application at her place of employment and come work for her. Initially, I didn't want to wind up having to work retail again, so I turned the offer down. That winter was bad, so I would have had some issues making it out to where the store was anyway, considering how many tiny icy roads I would have needed to travel that were either on hills or right next to steep bluffs. My friend continued to ask me every now and then to put in an application, so finally, I accepted. It was a tough job to the small, often temporary staff, and having to run not only a kitchen, but hot bar, salad case, and deli. But I got used to it quickly enough. With few exceptions, the people who worked in the store were fairly nice. Since the break room was nearby, I would see most of them at some point during the day. One of the constant visitors was a guy whom we'll call Travis. Travis was one of the few geeks in the store and a pretty easygoing guy all around, so it was fun when he popped by. He was also somewhat of a prankster, which is why this story won't be the last time we'll be hearing about him. But I digress. Since most of my geeky friends no longer lived in the area by that point, I was pretty happy to have someone local to talk about anime and games with on the occasions that I actually ran into Travis. So of course, I happened to tell this to my then best friend at the time, whom we'll call Tabitha. I've briefly mentioned Tabitha before, though up until this point I haven't given her a name. And she was one of my 2 former roommates, and one of my main reasons why I wound up in the Midwest. Anyway, for a couple of years, Tabitha was one of the few people I could turn to talk when things got rough, and vice versa. So of course, I had to tell her about the new friend I made. It was during that conversation that the subject of our mothers came up, as it usually did. We both had very strict mothers, with hers being over-religious to the point her zeal got in the way of her children's growth, at least, mostly with her eldest daughter anyway. Whereas mine was, well, a book in and of herself. As an act of rebellion, if you can classify our geeky form of catharsis during our early 20s as such, one of us had come up with the brilliant idea of putting the theme songs of video game bosses as ringtones for our mothers. Mine? One-Winged Angel. That's right, I put Sephiroth's theme song as my mother's ringtone. Literally, she was the only one besides my bestie who had special ringtones. Besides, since talking to the bestie brought joy, I put an awesome ringtone for hers, and the song with the anxiety-inducing synthetic violin screeches straight out of a horror movie as my mother's. It made perfect sense at the time because, hey, if I'm going to be on high alert anyway, I may as well feel like I'm gearing up for a boss battle. It's the little things in life that help you get by in difficult times, you know? Thankfully, neither one of our mothers would have understood the geeky jibes and would have thought it was just that we had put loud music as our ringtones, because they were important enough that they needed to be heard immediately. Tabitha immediately made her ringtone swap, but I hadn't yet. I couldn't find the file to download with my old phone, and with me saving my phone data to watch Let's Plays when I felt rough, I had to wait until I could go to the library and use their Wi-Fi. This meant that the song was not yet on my old flip-top when the story takes place. This is important. I know this may seem childish, but trust me, we needed this little act of rebellion. It was a symbolic jibe at some very toxic people, including one whom I was trying to extricate myself from her life before it was too late. Just something personal and a tiny bit therapeutic. Yeah, I know our mothers had issues and weren't quite demons. Highly toxic, at times incredibly charming, but still humans. My exact words to Tabitha were actually, I know my mother's not Satan or anything, but hellfire, girl, you know what she's like. I really should have seen the foreshadowing coming, to be honest. Fast forward a couple of weeks. I was working in the kitchen with my then supervisor and Anne, whom you all might recall from my previous video, egg yolks. Anne and I were about to make a few batches of cornbread muffins when I heard music playing. I stopped laughing at whatever we were joking about and listened for a few minutes before I realized what was playing. Sure enough, it was One Winged Angel. And for a moment, I thought that maybe I was just tiring and mishearing the store radio. I mean, it was getting closer to Halloween, so maybe I was hearing some other song with synthesized violins playing. Surely that had to be it, right? Nope. The song kept getting louder and louder. I then saw that my supervisor and Anne were looking around, trying to find the source of the noise. Now, Anne's about 20 years older than me, and the only things game-related she knew about were vague references from her son and grandchild. As for my supervisor, she might play Pokemon on a dull day, but that was pretty much it. I asked if it was either of their phones, just in case. Nope again. Anne then looked at me and asked, "Is that your phone?" My hand flew to my thigh and felt the telltale bulge of my flip phone in my pocket. For a moment, I figured that maybe I had just left the volume on by accident. But then I realized that there was one teensy-weensy little problem with that theory. I had never gotten around to actually downloading the song. There was no way anyone else could have known about my idea to implement that ringtone. When I talked to Tabitha about it, I was alone in a house I was renting from a cousin. Tabitha only knew one person at my job, and even if my friend wanted to play a prank on me, there was no way our mutual friend could have gotten a hold of a phone that had been in my pocket all day. The moment that dawned on me, I pretty much lost my grip on reality. Now, I've been in some scary situations before, and had quite a few close calls leading up to that point. I had also finally left my mother's house under extreme duress recently and had to deal with some pretty insane emotional and verbal backlash until I came to a sort of compromise to come see her once in a while, which was never for very long, and I would show up wondering, is this the day she finally snaps? I won't say it was the smartest thing ever, but I did what I felt I had to buy myself some peace, or she would just start hassling me at work. I had only just started renting from the one cousin that nobody in the family dared mess with after a very creepy encounter with my mother at my grandparents' house that made me realize I wasn't safe from her there, which I should have seen coming, really. I had made a few attempts to get out of my mother's before, only for her to inflict so much grief upon my granny that it sent her anxiety through the roof and caused discord between her and Papaw, which would lead me to going back to a horrible environment because there would be no peace for anyone until I did. But even though I had just started renting from my cousin, I was still scared of my mother and what she would do now that she had lost control of me, and access to that constant stream of income and free labor that she got from me. On top of that, I honestly have to admit one other thing. I don't fear a lot of paranormal stuff, but when I was young, I kind of felt like my mother had some sort of supernatural ability that scared me. I mean, even back in the mobile home, picture frames would tilt and I could feel the atmosphere inside the trailer shift even before she got home in a bad mood. I realized later that, maybe she didn't even realize this stuff was happening, let alone dream that she was the one causing it. She always seemed to be able to tell when I was scared, too, though I attributed that to being too young to know how to hide my emotions properly. I felt like she honestly could read my mind, to where, for a few years when I was little, I actually watched my thoughts around her. Of course, by the time this story takes place, I had known that wasn't the case for a very long time. But in the moment that I heard that ringtone go off, that was supposed to be my first real jibe at her, That childhood fear came rushing back to my mind, and I just lost it. Oh my god, she really is Satan! My mind started reeling with theories that started getting more and more convoluted and nonsensical as fear overtook me. Was my mother actually not disturbed, but truly evil? Was this a warning from the future that danger was coming? Did I break the space-time continuum or something? Like I said, nonsensical. The whole time, I'm blindly trying to jam my hand into my pocket and failing because, hey, I'm still wearing an apron. So for about 40 seconds, I'm stuffing my apron deeper and deeper into my pocket and losing any chance I had at gaining purchase on my phone. Then, I started to see the black spots. Right as the darkness started creeping in and my vision started to blur, I turned around in a wild attempt to tell my boss that bad crap was about to go down. That was when I happened to catch sight of something small and gray on the windowsill of the interior window that looked out onto the deli cases and hot bar. Was that a Game Boy? I thought. No, not a Game Boy, but a phone that looked just like the small console. That was when the memory of Travis stopping by to leave his phone on charge with us, since someone else had already taken over the outlet at the break table, came back to me. In an instant, the black spots started to disperse, and I started shrieking with relieved laughter. I turned and laid my head on one of the tables and tried to steady myself so I wouldn't completely collapse onto the floor. Meanwhile, my supervisor and Ann are trying to comprehend how I could go from bouncing around and laughing to stock still and pale as death to screeching like a freaking banshee in the span of about a minute and a half. Apparently, I was so loud that they could hear me up front, so the head manager came back to see who had died. Oops. Instead, he just finds my idiotic self slumped over the table with my coworkers completely baffled around me. After squeaking out, "I'm fine," the manager just shook his head and told me to keep it down once he realized that nobody was bleeding or about to leave work in a hurry due to a death in the family. Eventually, I managed to catch my breath and told Ann and my supervisor what had happened without going into too many details. The unfortunate part for Travis is that he had played the best prank on me without even realizing what he had done. So no bragging rights for him. And that, my friends, is the story of how a ringtone of a video game boss's theme song nearly made me faint from sheer terror. Pretty embarrassing at the time, but it actually brought a bit of levity to the situation regarding all of the stress I had been under. I guess if I've got to get scared to the point of nearly passing out, at least it was over something completely harmless, right? If you like this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell too. That way you can catch your latest spooky fix the moment it comes out. Also, please check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/phantasmalpoppy. Even pledging $1 a month helps me pay the bills, so you have my thanks. Before I go, has anyone else ever been scared half to death by something so silly as a ringtone? If so, then drop your story in the comments. Also, if you want to, make your humble narrator here feel better for being a total derp, then comment, "I ain't afraid of no ghost," down and below. Thank you. Good night, and see you all real soon.